Hi there. If you're listening to this message is specifically for you.
Thank you for listening to the CoBB. I'm Sharan and I co host this with Sudeep.
We've been at it for some time, and we really want to thank you from the bottom of our heart for listening to us and making us reach thus far.
And we'd love to know a lot more about you and what you would like to hear from us.
And hence, please take just 2 minutes of your time and fill this form. The links are in the comments or in the show notes. It will help us recognize who you are and also get your expectations so that we can craft the podcast content to satisfy those expectations.
Welcome to CoB, Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharvan Raghavan.
Sudeep, with so much of the work that you discuss, saying hiring agencies, firing agencies, and managing stakeholders, what does a marketing team inside a company do? Let's talk about that today.
Now that you've skipped to the other side, you now are doubting what the marketing team does, is it?
That's the only point where I wedge myself into all the organizations that I work with.
Hmm. Okay. No, fair. Like we've said in the past that the job of a marketing team largely is to, build conviction, sell conviction, etc. And I think in one of the previous episodes we also spoke about branding and marketing and the steps involved there. So maybe what we can do today is to, get into discussing what are the key things that marketing teams do themselves,
If they
or
do,
if they do, or rather, I how I put it is what they lead
okay,
and where do they follow. Yeah.
okay, so it's
Or
working together.
yes, almost always. I don't think there are many things that any of these guys does all alone.
Okay.
So therefore, we can discuss what do they insource and what do
Hmm.
they outsource.
Fair enough. So,
Yeah,
is there, as usual, would you have a thumb rule of what you insource and what you outsource?
there is one, or as I call it, a principle. I think the principle possibly is, and it is not just relevant to marketing teams, but also to maybe anybody who is building their business. When we start off, we are doing everything that is needed for the business.
Right.
Slowly but steadily, we realize our plates are full, and then we are not able to do what we really want to do. And hence, I think even if you don't act on it right away, any marketer or any business guy should have clarity on possibly one or two things.
Hmm.
First is what is your core competency,
As in the business.
the business.
Right.
What are you in the business of,
Hmm.
right? For example, if I were to ask people what does PVR do,
Hmm.
they will say PVR hosts movies. But I believe the core competency of PVR is real estate.
Hmm.
Yeah. Movies anyways, people come and sell to them. There are very PVR might decide how many screens it will take, how many screens it won't. But one of the most critical determinants of long term success of PVR is real estate or their location, which determines what is the kind of footfall they will continue to get regardless of the movie that they host.
It's basically in the retail business.
It's in the retail business. So you similarly, people say McDonald's is also in retail business.
Right.
Yeah, because everything else they have standardized,
Right.
right? So therefore, it needs to be clear to the founder or the marketing team what is their core competency.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, because all of us are business guys, we have to make money for the business.
Hmm.
We have to be clear about what is cheaper to do outside. There will be things which you want to do,
Hmm.
but doing it, those are not your core competency, so therefore technically you should outsource them.
Mm-hmm.
But you might realize for a certain period of time it is cheaper for you to do it rather than giving it outside.
Are you saying cheaper and expensive on a cost money basis?
On multiple things, if you are a founder, and you possibly have a background in, for example, chemistry, but you're passionate about creating a household cleaners brand
Hmm.
in FMCG space. Since you know chemistry well, you know that you will be able to work on your own formulations and get them to the level of effectiveness, etc., that you really want to get to.
Right.
Even if for a household cleaners brand, frankly, the product itself is very small cost. Yeah,
Hmm.
the biggest cost or the biggest determinant of success will be how are you able to differentiate yourself in consumers mind.
Right.
And in that category, I deliberately took the name of that category because the category is fairly crowded,
Mm-hmm.
and very little product differentiation has been attempted or is possible,
Right.
but there is significant amount of branding or positioning differentiation that has been attempted and done.
Right.
Now your core therefore for that company might be distribution and branding,
Hmm.
but since you already have a background in chemistry and you possibly think that you will be able to mentor one or two people and you will be able to create your chemistries on your own, you might not outsource that.
Hmm.
Yeah. For somebody who might be wanting to create a FMCG brand in cleaner space who doesn't have any background there,
Mm-hmm.
might still outsource chemistry creation to some kind of a lab,
Mm-hmm.
to which they give a brief and receive a product, etc., etc. Yeah.
Okay.
First consideration is about what is your core competency.
Mm-hmm.
Second is simply a business consideration. Let me give you another example. If you're a conglomerate, when I was reading through Adani buying over ACC, Ambuja, etc., they visualize this deal as something where they'll be able to bring significant amount of efficiencies because of other group companies that they have. Yeah, like in Adani electricity, now the biggest component in cement is usually your electricity or the cost of transportation. These are the only two things. Manufacturing isn't.
Right.
On transportation, they believe that using their ports,
Hmm.
yeah, and other transportation efficiencies that they have, they'll be able to make money. And electricity is something where they'll be able to save significantly because they have a transmission company or a electricity generation company.
A
Yeah,
perfect example of the sum being greater than the parts.
correct.
Hmm.
Correct. And hence, they would therefore insource some of these things
Mm-hmm.
because it is definitely cheaper to do it inside than outside.
Right.
Yeah. For a cement company, otherwise, the product is not as different, but the key is in branding and distribution.
Hmm.
Yeah. And possibly the kind of work that you do with contractors, etc. Yeah.
Hmm.
So that becomes your core competency. Yeah.
Right.
There aren't outsourced cement plants available, but it is an industry which possibly is ripe for that,
Hmm.
because this is an industry that works on making cement closer to the consumption and
Hmm.
therefore giving the lowest possible cost to the consumer.
Right.
And hence, if you are somebody who is looking as an entrepreneur who is looking to do this, you can possibly think about setting up some plants which can be outsourced to some of these companies. But coming back to what I was saying earlier, to your question on principle, what is your core competency?
Hmm.
And number two, business wise or economics wise, what seems to be cheaper to do inside, at
Efficiency.
least at least as of now.
Right. Got it. I think you put it very beautifully, and you also sidestep the main question
Uh-huh.
of what are the marketers doing today, because you're now a
I'll come
business
to that.
leader, right?
I'm
So
come to that.
let me make it even sharper.
Ah,
Walk me through the processes or the steps that are there in marketing today,
ah,
and which of those steps can be insourced and what can be outsourced.
okay. So I think today's rant of yours is reserved for marketers. It is amply clear to me
This
and
is
to our
completely your
listeners.
episode. I'm just the color here.
Okay, let's get to marketing then. Yeah.
Right.
From a marketing point of view, you might remember one of our, I think, first few episodes was about branding before marketing. We defined branding as something which is a sum total of all the promises that you make to a consumer,
Hmm.
and marketing as the task of taking those promises to your consumer. So if we follow the same thought, you will first do branding,
Hmm.
and therefore you will do some pre-work around understanding your consumers, understanding your competitors, understanding some of the need gaps, understanding what your consumers are doing about those needs gaps today,
Mhm.
who are you substituting, what do your competitors bring on the table, etc. So
Right.
garnering some amount of market intelligence and consumer intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Basis that, and basis your own product truth, you articulate your proposition. Why do you exist? Why should the consumer consider you in their life? Then you create a consumer bundle for your product or your service. The reason I say bundle, Sharon, is that sometimes you will create the product after you feel the need.
Right.
Sometimes you will always already have a product, but you will build the communication, packaging, and paraphernalia around it
Right.
after you understand what need it needs to satisfy.
Retrofitting it.
Yeah, retrofitting it. So
Got
you
it.
you construct a bundle. You don't sell a product, you don't sell a service, you always sell a bundle.
I think in one of our recent episodes, we mentioned very clearly
Yeah,
whether you're in the business of service or product,
yeah,
you are only in the business of experience.
correct, correct. So that experience is what I'm terming as bundle. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So after this third one, as you were explaining in one of the episodes earlier about various stages of FMCG,
Right.
we said that then you go into your long queue,
Hmm.
where you tend to take your product to people, you experience your product market fit, etc., etc. So there is those early activation.
Right.
Yeah. Alongside that, and before you decide to go for your marketing, you have to choose which channels you would use to influence your target segment, right?
Okay.
Where does your target segment exist? What do they read? What do they see? Etc.
Channel of
etc.
sale, channel of communication.
Channel of communication.
Got
Yeah.
it. Okay.
Channel of sale you would have already figured out because
Yeah.
you've done your PMF, etc.
Right.
Depending on what channel you're using, you craft your message,
Hmm.
because your proposition is already crafted. So you're only crafting your message. And the reason I choose channel before the message is sometimes the message or its articulation changes by the channel that you use.
Ah, that's a very good point, actually. Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of us make the mistake of creating the message and then force fitting it into every channel of communication.
Correct.
Good point.
Correct. Yeah.
Hmm.
So therefore you craft the message, then becomes the task of riding those channels to make your message reach. Then the last point possibly will be, then you collect feedback.
Hmm.
Feedback on product or service, feedback on your articulation, feedback on the channel or the media, and then you close loop it to make sure that you're able to make improvements for the next round.
Got it.
Yeah. So this is broadly what a marketing team keeps doing
Okay.
over and over again.
Okay. And
Yeah.
all of these are done in house
No, of
or
course
should
not.
be? Okay.
Of course not. So if I don't know how many of our listeners are from core FMCG,
Mm-hmm.
but purely from an FMCG point of view, task 1 to 3,
Hmm.
which is branding pre-work,
Hmm.
gaining market intelligence, consumer intelligence, articulating your proposition, creating product or a service bundle. Yeah. And task number 7, which is getting all the feedbacks and close looping it.
Hmm.
These are usually led by the marketing team,
Okay.
and obviously they have their creative partners, planning partners, media partners alongside them. Then task 4 to 6, which is choosing the channels, crafting messaging for the targeting channel, and then riding the channels to make the messaging reach, really doing the media.
Hmm.
These are the ones which are usually outsourced to the agency,
Hmm.
and the agency leads and the marketing team follows.
So you're saying the pre-work of the brand, articulating the proposition, creating the product or the service bundle,
Hmm.
and the job of getting feedback. These are the four elements of the seven, which
Yeah,
will be led by the in-house marketing team.
yeah.
Why is that?
It goes back to my previous point
Hmm.
to say that most of these are core to what you do.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
When you're selling your experience to your consumers,
Hmm.
you are selling that product or a service bundle that you created,
Hmm.
and you are selling your proposition to the consumer.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
It has to
So
come from the core of the business.
yes, and hence those are the things that you would definitely like to own.
Hmm.
But what I've realized over a period of time is that you need to own, but you need to just lead.
Hmm.
Yeah, you don't insulate or isolate your agency from it. The downside there is that marketers have age within the organization.
Right.
Marketing team come and go, so
Agencies
therefore,
stay.
yeah, agencies stay and the business owners stay,
Right.
and hence you will see them being involved, so that all the knowledge that was accumulated during this process, that is within the system and is utilized by marketing teams that come later.
Right. Choosing the channel, crafting the message, and
Yeah,
writing the channels to reach the message.
yeah,
These three are led by the agency.
correct.
Now, why is that? Shouldn't the choice of channel and message also be core to what the business is doing?
See, while these are also essential for delivery of your message and
Hmm.
thereby brings in dollars or rupees to the company, the fact is that this will require you to know your consumer side as well as your media data very well.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and for that you hire specific agencies who own that media landscape, who are able to bring in learning from other categories that are possibly targeting a similar consumer to yours,
Hmm.
and hence you get advantage of their the knowledge that they have accumulated over a period of time.
Got it.
Yeah,
Got it.
and since the consumer segment and their media habits are not owned by you,
Hmm.
they are owned by the consumer and the industry, and hence you go to industry experts to get it.
Right.
Yeah, similarly from a crafting the message perspective, it gets into the creative domain.
Hmm.
Yeah, and you therefore you get the best possible people to craft it for you. Yeah,
Fair enough.
and
Right.
finally the last one, riding the channels, is about media buying. I remember there was a time where most of the FMCG companies used to have a media guy in
Hmm.
house
Yeah.
who used to talk to channels and buy media.
Yeah. Yeah. You remember
Yeah,
that?
and media agency cost or commission used to be a big component of the cost that they used to incur.
Right.
And I think slowly but steadily companies realize that having a specialist media buying company is always better, because they bring in the latest knowledge and they also give you efficiencies of scale.
Hmm.
So therefore I think that evolution almost everybody has seen,
Right.
right? So this is what I described as a traditional FMCG, Sharan.
Thank you for listening to CoB, Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharvana Raghavan. Subscribe and learn more at cobcast.net. That's COBBCAST.net.
With the emergence of D2C, sticking to FMCG,
Yeah.
with the emergence of D2C and basically e-commerce, how does this change? Does it change the dynamics of what you own? Because the core of what the business is about is today very different.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So for example, for a lot of the e-commerce players now, either the product is in digital form or the product reaches via the digital channel, while the first three obviously remains with them at an early stage till you are still getting adopted by your critical stage of consumers, critical mass of consumers.
Hmm.
You know that you are only going to work on digital.
Yeah,
Yeah, all
absolutely.
D2C companies usually start with digital only,
Right,
right? So
right.
therefore the choice of channel is already made.
Negated. That's the only choice.
Yeah, that's the only choice. Now
Right.
you have aggregators like Google, Facebook, etc. available,
Hmm.
that allows you to get knowledge of mediums within that channel
Hmm.
or platforms within that channel, which will best serve your consumers. What we have seen now is that even step number 4, choosing the channel, becomes insourced.
Hmm.
Yeah, and even just step number 6, which is writing the channel, running the campaign, etc.,
Right.
becomes insourced,
Hmm.
because now you have sufficient capability in house to be able to run the campaigns, specifically because Google, Facebook have made it very easy for
Hmm.
anybody to run campaigns on their platforms.
Right. And I also think the core to these businesses, the new age digital first businesses, is that
Yeah,
their core competency also is
yeah,
the ability to communicate on the digital medium and get things moving.
yeah. Communicate, work on plans, drive efficiencies on a daily basis,
Right.
make changes, do alpha and beta experiments, etc., etc. Of course, when the D2C brands start becoming bigger,
Hmm.
when you start having multiple brands or multiple product lines, or when you start going beyond digital,
Hmm.
Once you've saturated possibly your adoption mechanism there, that is when you start looking at other avenues, which is about outsourcing some of these things again. So choosing
When the
channels.
priority becomes scale,
Yeah.
you start focusing on the other issues and outsource what you
Yeah.
built in house. Okay.
Yeah, and again the scale, because the scale brings its own set of complexities, right?
Right.
And that is when you want to get advantage of economies of scale,
Hmm.
right? So you go to bigger players who are able to buy better, who are able to source better, who are able to predict better, etc.
Right. So I get that, and it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But what do you make of these companies that insource even the creative
Hmm.
into their core?
Yeah, that's an interesting one actually. And a number of startups also have a production in house or
Yeah,
an
yeah. I think
creative
Swiggy,
agency
Zomato
in
have
house.
it for sure.
Yes,
Hmm.
yes, yeah. So now Zomato for sure keeps doing a lot of creative work. Yeah.
Right.
Now some, let's just look at that creative work into two parts.
Okay.
Yeah. Or rather three parts, I would say. One part which is specifically used for performance marketing. Yeah,
Okay.
because you are trying to attract a lot of people digitally. You're also talking to high intent consumers, and
Hmm.
high intent consumers therefore will need to be shown something which kind of completes their journey, right?
Right.
So therefore there is performance marketing creatives that are needed. Yeah. Now again, because like you said, most of these companies have competency there, those are usually insourced by the companies.
Hmm.
Yeah. The second part is what you call as equity building creatives.
Hmm.
Yeah. Your master creatives, as Zomato versus Zomato
Yep.
creative, etc., that they do, that's the second part. The third part is something which, which I call as salience building creatives. Yeah. Which is what, for example, Zomato keeps doing in terms of its notifications or social media posts, etc., etc.,
Hmm.
right? Because engaging with the consumers, keeping the conversation open, etc., has now become a norm for the brands. And hence, in you can't be a brand which just creates one communication a year and gets done with it.
Hmm.
You are communicating with your consumers continuously.
The volume of creatives is high.
Is very high, so therefore the three kind of creatives we spoke about is the performance marketing creative, the
Hmm.
salience creative that you keep doing throughout the year, and then there is the equity creative,
Right.
right? And hence, when you look at some of these companies, they have insourced all three of them. A lot of them might have insourced at least the first two. There is a merit in doing it, because the core to a company, for example, for a Zomato
Hmm.
or Zomato as you call it, you might call it, uh, when you look at them versus Swiggy, the offering isn't differentiated.
Right.
Yeah, it's the same offering, it's the same service. uh, they might have a Zomato Gold and Swiggy might have something else, etc., etc., but by and large people like you and me derive the same amount of benefits from both.
Right.
And hence the differentiation is about how well are you able to engage with the consumers,
Hmm.
and usually what is the first app that they go to, what comes to their mind first.
Right.
So it's a game of association, mental association, right?
Hmm.
And hence for them, possibly the salience creatives are very very critical.
Okay.
Yeah. It almost becomes like a core competency to them.
Yeah. Which one can you think of first?
Yeah, which one can you think of? It becomes core competency only after they have satiated their first core competency, which is operational excellence.
Right.
Of course you have to be operationally excellent, otherwise the consumers will not give you a second chance. So
Right.
therefore let's give credit to those teams, that they've done that work very very well.
Hmm.
Now they are able to differentiate themselves on the kind of association that they've built with their consumers, and hence salience creatives becomes one of the core competencies that they need to work into.
Right.
Yeah. This is almost akin to Sharan, the example that I had taken for Kinder Joy earlier,
Hmm.
where Kinder Joy over a period of time realized that toys have become an integral part of their
Yeah.
offering, and
Right.
hence they bought over the toy company and had insourced MPG, Magic Production Group, right?
Right.
So, and the point I want to drive here is that you need to keep re-evaluating your core competency at every stage of the business. You might realize that what was core competency earlier either ceases to remain so or
Hmm.
is not sufficient,
Right.
or
Can
hence
we
you,
call the core competency as the core business offering?
I would say that your business offering again, Sharon, possibly will be a compounded product
Hmm.
of various things that you do.
Fair enough. Right.
Yeah. So therefore, now, like we were saying, your business offering of PVR possibly is not real estate,
Hmm.
but the
Fair.
competency is real estate. What gives you strategic advantage, long term strategic advantage, is your core competency.
Perfect.
Yeah. So therefore, like we were talking in case of Zomato,
Hmm.
uh, so therefore, salience creatives is something which is salience creatives and performance creatives very critical,
Right.
and hence it makes sense for them to insource it. Now,
Yep.
once they have built that capability, possibly they also believe that they'll be able to do their equity creatives also.
Right.
Yeah. And there's no harm in trying that out, there's no harm in being on that run.
Hmm.
My belief, however, is that one needs to look at this holistically,
Hmm.
because a lot of the time we say that when we go outside we pay the agency fee, we work with directors, we work with production houses, and hence we end up paying a lot more.
Hmm.
Yeah. uh, when I look at a business, we should also look at our costs holistically. Yeah.
Okay. How's that?
Yeah, for example, when I say holistic cost,
Hmm.
uh, the fact that you want to build a certain quality of creative talent in house,
Hmm.
yeah, means that you need a certain quality of talent which will be different from the rest of your company,
The kind of talent you hire will have to be drastically different.
drastically different, and hence, you need to build that capability to hire that kind of talent.
Hmm.
Yeah. It takes cost and money to retain, to build that capability. You
Right.
will have leaders, you will have HR who will be able to judge them very, very well. You will develop processes where you're able to judge them very well.
Hmm.
Now you will pay money to retain those HR, retain those people. Also look at what is the competitive set for those people. Now they are not likely to move between Swiggy and Zomato. They are likely to move between a creative agency and a Zomato.
Hmm.
Yeah. Now if you evaluate yourself against a creative agency, you have advantages, you have disadvantages. A creative agency always keeps them fresh because they work on multiple brands.
Right.
They get different kinds of brief, they seep into different kind of target segments, and hence, they remain fresh, they remain relevant.
Also, the career path is very clear and traditional, right?
Correct. Now in this one you might be able to create a career path, but to a certain extent.
Point. Yeah.
So that's the first cost, which
Hmm.
is the cost of building talent and retaining it.
Building, managing, retaining talent
Yeah.
is a specific cost you incur. Okay.
The second is opportunity cost of doing this.
Okay.
If you're doing this, if the leadership team, if the business owner is spending time, if the CMO is spending time on this,
Hmm.
which means that he or she is not spending time on something else
Hmm.
which could have brought advantage to them in terms of strengthening their core competency. Yeah.
Okay.
When you're
Okay.
doing something, you have to recognize that you're not doing something else.
But wouldn't it be very similar for the CMO, the way they work with an external agency? Wouldn't it be the same?
No, I'm saying the time that they spend on building talent, attracting talent,
Hmm.
retaining talent,
Fair.
etc.,
All of that.
working out processes, etc.,
Got
all
it.
of that is an opportunity cost.
Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
you could have spent it on your marketing team or anything else. Again, I'm not saying that this is the right or wrong, but these are the considerations you must have.
Right.
Right. Now the third piece is that for every company works on capability development for people within the organization.
Right.
They want people to be developed, they want people to be updated, etc. Now same thing, what
Hmm.
works as a capability development for bulk of your team, which is operations and marketing, doesn't work for them.
Hmm.
So for this
Absolutely.
workforce,
Hmm.
you work separately on investing time, money, attention on developing capability and tech.
Hmm.
Yeah. That becomes another cost which possibly doesn't get accounted.
Got it.
Last but not the least is the culture, Sharon.
Hmm.
Yeah, each one of these professional tribes thrives in a certain kind of culture.
Right.
Yeah. That culture allows them to work in their best possible manner, allows them to express themselves well, etc., etc. So therefore that also becomes very difficult.
Hmm.
Amalgamating a culture of so many different kind of professions in itself is a challenge.
Hmm.
Yeah. uh, so all of those are costs
Right.
and need to be considered before we decide to insource something which requires a dramatically different mechanism to produce.
Hmm. Fair enough. I get it. What you're saying is, while people are insourcing a lot of the creative jobs, there are external costs that you'll have to look at holistically to understand whether it's actually being, if there is actually a cost benefit to all of this.
Yeah.
I get that. And it's a very, very fair point you're saying. But I want to ask another question,
Mm-hmm.
a hypothetical one.
Mm-hmm.
Until the e-commerce and the digital businesses came along in the last 10 to 15 years,
Mm-hmm.
FMCG brands were advertising the most. And that's why even cereals were called soaps, because that's where it all started.
Yeah.
So, w- why didn't FMCG businesses here insource creative for the volume of content they were churning out?
See, I don't, number one, I don't think the volume was so high.
Hmm.
Yeah, the kind of volume needed to keep a brand salient on social media where the consumer is completely stuck to the screen entire day
Hmm.
is very different from kind of volume of content that you needed for TV where the consumer
Hmm.
spends a limited amount of time. Yeah.
The avenues of communications were limited.
Yeah, now the avenues of communication have exploded. So you are there for, for a brand which is possibly youthful,
Hmm.
wants to be on Insta, Snapchat, Facebook all at the same time, and within that you are doing a post, you are doing a reel, etc., etc. So therefore it is the explosion of communication channels as well as creative formats.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
So therefore, not only are you churning propositions, but each of those propositions is getting turned into creatives and creative formats
Hmm.
to service all of these.
Right.
Right. I think that's why a lot of the creative has uh, is started getting produced, and
Hmm.
hence this whole thing about insourcing, etc., has started coming about.
Right. And would it possibly be a legacy thing that FMCG companies and brands have always used agencies, and the agencies have worked on the brands more than the marketers have? And therefore, even when the volume has increased for the output, they've continued to function with an outsourced agency on the creative side.
Maybe possibly I would still go back to the media example that we spoke about.
Mm.
Yeah. So the and let's cut it into two parts. Your question comes more from a planning and a creative agency point of view.
Right.
The media, we understand,
Mm.
once the companies start realizing that the volume of media that they are consuming is sufficiently high, they knew that they had to go out, right?
Right.
Now from a creative point of view, once you start partnering with a marketing agency or a creative agency, one advantage that you get obviously is the legacy of brand that you build with them.
Right.
So therefore you're preserving the entire legacy for your posterity, the whole thinking process, etc. As the marketing teams change, the agency should keep that consistent.
Hmm.
Number two, you also go to them because an agency brings along a fairly fresh and a neutral perspective. Yeah.
Mm.
An agency is viewing the same consumer from different point of views.
Right.
The same agency works on a chocolate and a soap and a hair oil, and hence they have seen the same consumer from different point of views.
Mm.
Yeah. They have articulated the same need, the need for validation, for example, in so many different ways
Mhm.
that I think they are able to add significant value to the process. Yeah.
Got it.
So you derive efficiencies out of that also, and the presence of an agency, presence of somebody who has had this kind of a multifaceted experience
Mm.
allows you to short circuit the process.
Mm.
Yeah, you don't have to struggle with all the discoveries on your own. There are discoveries that have already been made and you get to experience them if you work with some of these agencies.
Right. And I have one final question.
Yep.
It goes back to the first one, though.
Hmm.
Let's keep the marketers out of this, just so
Yeah.
I get an honest answer from you.
Yeah.
So let's say I'm starting a business today, a brand, an FMCG brand.
Uh-huh.
I have a person who can make it. I have an
Yeah.
agency who can who can do the creatives. I've tied up with a distribution partner, and most of these partners, and ask any agency, they'll tell you as long as the marketers don't interfere with my job will be good.
Hmm.
So, can a brand be built just by aggregating these services without a brand manager or marketer's input?
Hmm. Okay. So your question had an accusation and a question. Let me address the accusation first. The accusation was that you will get an honest answer if you don't get marketers into this. Right. Let me summarily reject the supposition that is hidden in this accusation. Now, to your question, uh, I think as long as you have the right kind of partners, you can get the right quality of output, of course, from each one of them.
Hmm.
And with all those right outputs put together, you will be able to create a compelling bundle. There's no doubt about that,
Right.
right? My core belief is that even if you don't have a marketer, then you yourself, as a startup owner,
Hmm.
are doing the job of a marketer. Yeah,
Okay.
you are aggregating whatever comes about from all of these partners that you have, and then you are making sure because you are keeping the conscious of the brand.
Mm.
You own the conscious of the brand. You are the final authority in saying yes or no towards various kind of outputs that will come from various agencies, right?
Right.
Because somebody needs to live, eat, sleep the brand to be
Mm.
able to act as the brand's conscience. Some of
Right.
these agencies will act as consumers conscious, which is
Mm.
excellent. That's how you complement each other. But somebody needs to act as a brand conscious. Now that could be the business owner. Usually in a lot of the companies it is the business owner. But once they realize that they have grown to a significant scale, they realize that they can't play just that role. Again,
Mm.
opportunity cost starts coming into play.
Right. So it gets handed to the marketers.
Marketers, correct.
Mm. So the brand thinking or the brand conscience is the core part which makes the brand, which cannot be outsourced.
Correct. So which is where your first three steps come in.
Right.
You can't develop a conscious till the time you do your branding pre-work. You
Mm.
develop insights and knowledge about your consumers, category, competition. You can't develop a brand conscious till you have developed your own, or you've understood your own proposition very very well. And you can't develop a brand conscious till the time you have articulated your own brand bundle or articulated your own brand experience.
Right. You want to curate the experience.
You want to curate the experience, or at least understand the curated one.
Mm.
Yeah, only then you will be able to live it every day.
Perfect, Sudeep. I think you answered the question brilliantly, and you explained how marketers actually bring a lot to the table. So
Mhm.
I like how you articulated the 7 steps involved in creating, taking a brand to the market, which is your pre-work of the brand, understanding the market, the consumers, the competitors, articulating the proposition you're bringing to the consumer, creating the product or the service bundle, choosing the channel through which you're going to influence your target audience, crafting the message for the channel as per the channel that you've chosen, then writing the channel to make the messaging reach, and the last step, which is getting product feedback. Of this, the first three and the last about product feedback should always be insourced, while 4, 5, and 6, which is the choice of channel, the crafting the message, and writing the channel, are traditionally outsourced and can remain so.
Hmm.
And the point with a lot of brands insourcing the creative work is that you can look at it as a cost saving exercise because you're letting go of all the commissions in between. But when you look at it holistically, the opportunity cost and the cost of managing, recruiting, retaining this talent can actually end up being more than what you would have incurred if this were outsourced.
Yeah.
I think that's great. And the last point you mentioned also brought or reminded me of an analogy where the director of the movie really does nothing. You can never point out what the director's done in a movie.
Hmm.
You can't let a cinematographer, a set designer, a costume designer, and an actor just make a film
Hmm.
because it
Hmm.
really has to
Hmm.
be held in place as an anchor. And marketers are probably the directors of the brand story.
Yeah, excellent analogy, Sharon. It didn't occur to me, but you're very right. Director just owns the vision of the story,
Right.
and in fact, the story, broad stories, is held by them.
Hmm.
Even the dialogues, etc., are written by the scriptwriter.
Absolutely.
But the ethos of the story, the sentiment, and everything is owned by the director. That's the only thing that he or she owns.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Very well put. Yeah, I like it.
Awesome. And thank you for a lovely episode.
Thank you, Sharan.
Thank you for listening to CoB, Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharvana Raghavan. Subscribe and learn more at cobcast.net. That's CoBBcast.net.